You have joined to learn about banking, and you will wonder why I am learning non-banking. When you joined IBSL, you want to do banking. Now you start with a different subject called non-banking. Why? What is meant by non-banking? Anyway, our subject area is known as NBFI, non-banking financial intermediaries. Let's get one by one. Financial intermediaries. What are they? What is a financial intermediary? A financial intermediary means a third party. This third party connects surplus units and deficit units. Now, what is a surplus unit? Remember, money always gives us two questions. Money always leaves us with two questions. So what are they? Number one, I have enough money and I do not know what to do with that. We call it surplus units. What is the other question? Money lives with us. That is, I have enough needs, but I don't have much money. So we call them deficit units. How do you solve this gap? It's very simple. If those who have money hand over that to those who don't have, then we can solve this problem. Now, if you have money, let's say you have 5 million rupees with you, and your very good friend, your best friend need 5 million, he want to buy a car. Will you lend him your hard-earned 5 million? Most probably, the answer is no. Now, if your best friend asks a small amount, let's say 1,000 rupee, yes, you will hand over easily. But you have saved your hard-earned 5 million, and your best friend need that 5 million and ask you as a loan. You're not ready to give. Why? Any feedback? Can you give your hard-earned money to your best friend? Any feedback? You can just chat. Most of the time, you will not hand over your hard-earned money because you don't trust that your best friend will be able to repay you. Now there leaves a problem. There are surplus units, those who have excess money, and there are deficit units, those who don't have money, but they know what to do with money. Now, how do you solve this problem? There is a third party who will collect money from the surplus units and hand over that to the deficit units. You call them financial middlemen. The best word is financial intermediaries, NBFIs, non-banking financial intermediaries. Now, you who is afraid to hand over your hard-earned money to your best friend is ready to give that hard-earned money to an unknown third party called financial middleman. Why? Why are you ready to hand over this hard-earned money to a third party? Any guess? Because you trust this third party called bank or a finance company. Why do you trust them? Because they are regulated by an independent regulator. In most of the countries, this regulator is known as central bank. Now, this is what financial intermediary is. Let's just read. A financial intermediary is typically an institution that facilitates the channeling of funds between lenders and borrowers indirectly. That is, savers give funds to an intermediary institution, such as a bank, and that institution gives those funds to spenders. Now, your hard-earned money is given to a third party, and that third party hands over that money to your best friend. You are very happy. Your best friend is also happy. Why are you happy now? Because you believe your hard-earned money is safe, and you call it a deposit. I deposited in this bank, or I deposited my money in this finance company, and you are very happy. You are very confident that at any moment you can withdraw your money. But if you handed over your 5 million to your best friend, you will not be able to get that money whenever you need. Now, this is why you prefer to hand over the money to a third party called financial middleman. And I said there is a third party who is looking into all these aspects. The central bank or the regulator will monitor the activities of the bank, and they will ensure lot of factors, lot of criteria is followed by these institutions. In return, that will ensure your money is safe. You don't have a specialty to recover the money, but at the bank or at the finance institution, there are specialized employees known as recovery officers who will be taking care of your money, which was already handed over to someone who asked the loan. Now, this is called financial intermediary. Yes. Now, there are people from one side, the borrowers. The other side, you have depositors. And the middleman, called the bank, charge a fee, which is known as interest for doing this service. The depositors get an interest, and you are very happy with your savings interest and fixed deposit interest. Some people, like the retired employees, they hand over this hard-earned money to the bank and they make a living out of this interest. They are so much sure that the deposited money is safe and they can live a life happy. They need not to worry much about the money they have handed over to the bank. That is the depositor's side. The borrowers, they take a large amount as a loan which they cannot easily spend out from their monthly income. So that hard-earned money handed over by the depositors is now being utilized by the borrowers. The borrowers utilize this money to buy certain assets or to meet their consumption needs. In return, they will pay an interest to the bank. The difference between the interest given to depositors and the interest charged from the borrowers is taken over by the middleman called bank. So this process is known as financial intermediation. Now I'll ask you a very simple question. Can you leave out financial intermediary? Can you leave out financial intermediation? Think. You who is afraid to hand over, you who are afraid to hand over your hard-earned money to your best friend, now find it very safe to hand over the same money to a middleman which is regulated. If you remove this financial intermediation, that bank interest can be wiped out. the depositor and the borrower can be very happy. But it's very difficult to remove out this financial intermediation process. There were a lot of efforts done by different people today using internet. You can take money from unknown parties, from different parties, collect them and use for some other funds. There were different attempts, but most of them or some of them failed. Once there was a website known as wonga.com, they collected money and they gave out loan as microfinance. And they were concentrating on United Kingdom. Now these attempts are there. There are websites like kickstart.com. If you have a very good concept, like I want to start up a movie and I need this much of capital to do this project, a lot of people from different places will hand over you money and ask it back. Now, can you trust this kind of websites and hand over your hard-earned money instead of a bank, which is regulated by a independent part called central bank? Now, these are some attempts taking place even now. However, the financial intermediary is taking place because both parties, depositors and borrowers, prefer that mechanism. This is why it's difficult to remove out financial intermediary. Now our subject is non-banking financial, and we are looking at first financial intermediation. I hope now we have an understanding of financial intermediation. It's very simple. Collecting from the surpluses, handing over it to a third party, then to those who need it. This whole process is known as financial intermediation. This graph will simplify the act of connecting surplus units and deficit units. So if you asked, now we can look at our exam papers. In exam, you get a paper, NBFI paper. Question number 1 is compulsory, and initially you have very short answers. MCQ, first 5 questions, then short answers. Now if you asked a very direct question with a short answer expectation, what is financial intermediary? It's very simple. The act of connecting surplus units and deficit units. Now you can see the graph. Savings, depositors, they handed it over to a bank, and you will find borrowers. And the financial intermediary, it can be a bank or a finance company or any other. It is regulated by a regulator, and most of the time that is central bank. Remember, in different countries, different names are used to address this financial intermediary, the regulator of this financial intermediary. In Sri Lanka, we call it CBSL, Central Bank of Sri Lanka. In USA, we call it Federal Reserves. So within bracket statutory reserve requirement, that is mentioned, central bank. Now, if you have surplus units, surplus money, you want to hand over it to the third party. And in order to trust this third party, you ask something in return. Now, whenever you hand over your hard-earned money to a bank, when you put your hard-earned money on the bank counter, you expect something in return. What is that? You expect a piece of paper signed, authorized. You ask an evidence. I handed over my hard-earned money and I need evidence. So you may get a passbook or a fixed deposit certificate, bond certificate, likewise, an evidence to prove you have handed over your money to financial intermediary. Why do you want it? Because you trust that I have a proof, and the banker or the financial intermediary will give you different names for this piece of paper. We call them financial instruments. Now we look this side. Surplus units. Surplus units hand over money, and in return, they get a nice financial product. It can be stocks, bonds, notes, CDs, pre-need plans, T-bills, life insurance plans, bankers' acceptance. Now in a class, if I ask how many of you have savings accounts, I know almost all the hands will go up. Your parents have trained you to save from your childhood. Then I would ask, okay, very happy. So you all have savings accounts. How many of you have CDS accounts? Now all of you have savings accounts. Now how many of you have CDS accounts? I can't see your reaction, but I know most of the time your answer is no, I don't know what is CDS account. Let me tell, CDS is Central Depository System. You have CDS accounts. If you have CDS account, that means you can buy or sell stocks. Now, in this subject, we will learn all these things. What is a stock? How do you trade it? We'll talk about bonds. Now, these are the financial instruments available for surplus units. Now I look into the other side. Deficit units. Deficit units also have different financial products. What are they? I need money. I have different requirements. And when the bank is handing over me the money which I required, they offer me different financial products. It can be credit card. It can be personal loan, leasing, hire purchasing, bank loan, margin trading, factoring. There are a lot of names. After learning this subject, you will be very clear about these different financial products. We call them financial instruments. Now, I prefer if you start up looking at different financial products and check how much you know about them. Now, if I say leasing, what is that? What is the difference between leasing and hire purchasing? When should I take a personal loan? What if I take a credit card? What are things which I can buy from a credit card? Should I use a credit card for purchasing capital goods? Then you must ask me, what is a capital good? Okay. Something that will require a very long period to pay back, and while doing that, you will earn. So that will be a capital good. Maybe you are buying machinery. Credit cards are basically aimed at consumption requirement to meet your day-to-day requirements, pharmaceuticals, likewise. I prefer if you have very good understanding. I know at the end of this subject, you will have a very good understanding of these different financial products. Now, if I ask you, what is margin trading? Most of the time your answer would be, sorry, I have not heard about what is margin trading. What is margin facility? Now, if you are the existing shareholder, or if you have a very good portfolio of shares, you can collateralize this, and against that you can take a loan. I know that these terms are, most of the time these terms are new to you. What is margin trading? What is share portfolio? How do you collateralize? These unknown things will be known to you at the end of this subject. Once you learn this subject, in addition to passing the exam, you will get this wealth of knowledge. Remember, these financial instruments are like vehicles. Different vehicles are manufactured to cater into a different requirement. Remember, ship is a vehicle, so is the wheelbarrow. We need all these vehicles for meeting different requirements. What I require now may be a wheelbarrow, and I cannot use some other vehicle like lorry for replacing this wheelbarrow. Means what? There are different financial products for different requirements. When I use a credit card, I use it for some other purpose. When I use margin trading facility, I use it for some other purpose. When I take hire purchasing, when I am taking leasing, I am aiming at different requirements. Now, funds are moved from one side to the other, from the surplus to the deficit. Deficit earners, deficit spenders will pay back slowly, and both parties, surplus units and deficit units, will use different financial instruments. Now we are coming to our main area, NBFI sector, non-banking financial intermediaries. By now you have a very good understanding of financial intermediation, the third party activity of connecting surpluses and deficits. That is the very simple understanding of financial intermediation. There are commercial banks. These commercial banks can maintain current accounts. Now you have seen checkbooks. Only commercial banks can issue these checks. That is the special factor differentiating banks from others. Only commercial banks can maintain demand deposits or current accounts. But there are many other financial intermediaries who will act almost like banks and offer similar products other than current account. Let's read. NBFI facilitate bank-related financial services such as investment, risk pooling, contractual savings, and market brokering. For examples of these include insurance firms, pawn shops, cashier check issuers, check cashing locations, payday lending, currency exchange, and microloan organizations. Take your time and think about these institutions that you have seen. You have seen many pawnbrokers, and most of them which you have seen may be regional, maybe they are not commercial banks. At the same time, you have seen Commercial banks also do this pawn blocking business. Means what? Non-banking institutions do similar activities to banks. You cannot see any other institution handing over a checkbook. But other than that, many other products offered by banks are offered by institutions which are not banks. That's what we call non-banking institutions. Now, once again, we'll read. Insurance, pawn, cashier checks, payday lending, currency exchanges, microloans. Now, these are the activities done by non-bankers. They're almost similar to banks. When you go to a bank, yeah, you can do pawning, you can get into foreign exchanges, you can get microloans. At the same time, you can do all these activities with institutions which are not also banks. We call them non-banking financial intermediaries, NBFI sector. Now I said non-bankers do similar activities to banks. Therefore, they are known as shadow banking. Shadow banking. Before we describe about shadow banking, let's look at some other terms used with the term shadow. Shadow boxing, you have heard. Shadow cabinet. Now, in a democratic country, the main opposition would have a shadow cabinet. Means what? Even though they are not in power, they will appoint a similar cabinet to look after the activities of the governing cabinet. We call them shadow cabinet. In the same manner, we are using the term shadow banking. We'll read, coined by Paul McCulley in 2007, with specific reference to American non-banking financial institutions that used short-term deposits to finance long-term loans. Now, shadow banking is a term used to address our area, non-banking. We are not banks, we are shadow banks. These shadow banks can do almost all activities other than issuing checks. Now, shadow banks refers to all non-bank financial intermediaries that provide services similar to those of traditional commercial banks. Now, for your short questions, I said the first one, what is financial intermediation? Then I said, what is financial intermediation? That is connecting surpluses and deficit units. Now, what is shadow banking? It refers to all non-bank financial intermediaries that do all similar activities to traditional commercial banks except demand deposits, except issuing checks. That is shadow banking. Now, if you refer a little bit, it is a term introduced to English by a money talking manager known as Paul McCulley. Then the third bullet under this slide, carry out traditional banking functions but do so outside the traditional system of regulated depository institutions. Most of these shadow banks are not regulated to the extent commercial banks are regulated. Commercial banks are regulated. Finance companies are regulated, but the level is different. Now, when we compare microfinance companies, they target a different market, and finance companies target another market. Banks target another market. Banks are highly regulated. For some time, before 2016 in Sri Lanka, microfinance area was not properly regulated. So the shadow banking refers to areas which are not highly regulated like commercial banks. So this is what is said by the third bullet. Carry out traditional banking functions, but not so regulated. Let's read. Over the past few decades, a network of diverse non-bank financial firms and markets, dubbed the shadow banking system by economist Paul McCulley, had developed alongside the formal banking system. The shadow banking system included non-bank lenders like mortgage companies and consumer financing companies. Non-banking financial firms have developed along with commercial banks, along with the banking system. But the shadow banking system, since it's less regulated, it started to grow. In Sri Lanka, microfinance business became a very lucrative business and many were interested because it is less regulated. And when you are less regulated in financial intermediary or the least regulated in the financial intermediary, many business people get into that believing it will give you a very high profit. And this is why they are also regulated. After 2016, after establishing this Microfinance Act, even that area is regulated. So it does not mean shadow banks are not regulated at all. Shadow banks are regulated, but not to the extent of commercial banks. Now let's look again what we discussed so far. Today, we started this new subject, NBFI. And you started to learn about non-banking financial business. Your aim is, number one, to pass the exam. Number two, get a very good knowledge about financial industry. First, I described financial intermediation. It's very simple. Get it right from the very beginning. Therefore, when you get it right from the very beginning, it will be very easy to prepare for your exams. Non-banking financial intermediation. First, we discussed what is financial intermediation. Then we discussed what is non-banking, what is meant by non-banking institutions. Non-banking institutions are almost like banks, but they are not. But they are not banks. Now, let's look at our country. We have commercial banks, and you have seen many other non-banking financial intermediaries. You have seen many advertisements asking your hard-earned money by these institutions. You have seen many financial products offered by these institutions. Leasing facilities, pawning, hire purchase, these are commonly known to you. Then there are products which are least known to you, like margin facility. Now our aim is looking into all this area. Still, we are looking at shadow banking, and you can see the picture of this economist, Paul McCulley, describe a large segment of financial intermediation that are outside the balance sheets of regulated commercial banks and other depository institutions. conduct functions of banking without access to central bank liquidity. Now, these are used to describe shadow banks, our area, non-bank. A large segment of financial intermediation that are not banks. And I said, banking sector is highly regulated. And if it's a balloon, when you press it, what happened? The area you press will be squeezed, and another area will blow up. Shadow banking is like that. Banks are highly regulated, and you prefer to move out when you can't meet the criteria asked by the banks to shadow banking. Now, those who cannot fulfill the requirement asked by a bank, normally when you go for a bank to get a loan, you ask few questions looking at these things: your payback history, the collaterals that you can offer, or the mortgages, the assets that you can mortgage. Basically, bank is looking into these aspects. Have you taken loans earlier from a bank, and how was your repayment? If that is clear, you can easily take a loan, another loan. And if you have an asset to mortgage against, the bank is ready to give you a loan. When you don't have both, you find other alternatives. That's where microfinancing business takes place. There are a lot of people with less income, or those who cannot prove their income because they don't have a salary slip. They fail to get facilities from well-established commercial banks. Then they move out to some other institutions. From time to time, we have seen in newspapers certain institutions which cannot legally accept deposits have accepted deposits and collapsed. And we have seen from time to time articles against charging too much interest by microfinance companies. Now, this is what is happening. Commercial banks are there, they are regulated, and it leaves a room for the people who will not get qualified to get a facility from commercial banks to find assistance from somewhere else. So this cartoon nicely shows you how the shadow banking takes place. When the regulators squeeze on banking, the shadow banks bubble up. As students, I prefer if you can take a notebook or a piece of paper and note down this. Anyway, you have these slides, so you need not to do it now, but later on you can take a piece of paper and like a arrow showing two sides, so you can see the entire picture in one paper. For an example, the financial intermediaries of Sri Lanka, that will be the heading. From your left-hand side, you will have institutions regulated by Central Bank of Sri Lanka, and to your right-hand side, there would be another slide, another area, institutions not regulated by Central Bank of Sri Lanka. When you take this entire chart at once, you can see clearly financial intermediaries of Sri Lanka. Now, just have a look. Institutions regulated by Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Deposit taking institutions. The other heading is other institutions. If you move to the other side, once again, you have deposit taking institutions Then you have contractual savings institutions. Then you have other specialized financial institutions. So there are, in the side where the institutions are regulated by CBSL, you have two headings. Deposit taking institutions, that is one heading. Other institutions, that is the other heading. Now I ask you a question and I need the feedback. My question is, can a specialized leasing company accept deposits from general public? Now this question is often repeated in past papers, where you have to write a very short answer, or in MCQ. My question is very simple. Can a specialized leasing company accept deposits? Can a SLC accept deposits? I'll put this slide again, check it, and write your answer. Yes, others, can you tell me your answer? You can chat. You can just type and let me know. Yes, I get 2 feedback. Good. Others, I'll show this slide again. My question is, can a specialized leasing company accept deposits? I got 2 answers. Yes, the answer is no. Now you are reading between the lines. Now these are the institutions regulated by central bank. Under that, you have 2 categories: deposit taking institutions, other institutions. My question was on specialized leasing companies, SLC. SLC lies not in the category of deposit taking institutions. So what does it mean? That means a specialized leasing company cannot accept deposits. So your answer is valid, no. Then I'll move a little bit further. We are talking of financial intermediation. Means what? We are collecting from surplus units and transferring that to deficit units. None of these institutions are printing money and giving it to someone else. None of these institutions are having a huge capital and give away loans out of this capital. No. They gather money, and you call it deposits or any other name, mark that word, any other name, and hand over that to the people who need them, deficit units. My second question, or my third question here is, you said specialized leasing companies cannot accept deposit. And I said, yes, that is the answer, correct. My third question is, if specialized leasing company cannot accept deposits, how do they fund their loans? In another way, I can ask that question in another format. What are the funding methods of a specialized leasing company? Once again, try to send me your answer. My question is, what are the funding methods of a specialized leasing company? You said specialized leasing company cannot accept deposits. Now, my question is, if a specialized leasing company cannot accept deposits, how do they fund? How do they get funds? I got one answer so far. Others think and send me your answer. Kalanga, yes, that's one answer. Others, send me your answers, then we'll discuss. Kalanga, your answer is okay. That is one alternative. That is not the only. Think and tell me other alternatives. Now, even though we are using this online, even though physically you are not meeting, I prefer and I think that you all have a notebook along with you. Take your notebook and write down our subject, financial, non-banking financial intermediaries, and write down this question so that will be the third question I asked today. But in your notebook, note down this as the first question. Write down, what are the funding methods of a specialized leasing company? What are the funding methods of a specialized leasing company? Okay, you get a mirror effect. No need to look at the whiteboard. My question is, what are the alternative funding methods of a specialized leasing company? And I got some good answers. Write down. Number one, equity. EQUITY, equity. Can you send me a feedback whether you have a notebook and whether you are writing on a notebook? Just say yes if you have notebook and writing. Okay, thanks. I got the feedback. So it's very clear. You all have a notebook and let's start. Let's get into the job. My question is, what are the alternative funding methods of a specialized leasing company? Number one, equity. EQUITY. You can put a hyphen and write owner's money. Equity means the money of the owner. Number two, bank borrowing. Bank borrowings. BORROWINGS. Bank borrowings. Number three, commercial papers. Commercial papers. Number four, promissory notes. Promissory notes. PRO, promissory. Promissory notes. Number five, debentures. Okay, debentures. Now For a specialized leasing company, you cannot accept deposits. I gave you this chart of financial intermediaries. We are looking first at the institutions regulated by Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Then there are two categories: deposit-taking institutions and other institutions. Specialized leasing companies are not falling into deposit-taking institutions category. Therefore, that is a specialized leasing company which cannot accept deposits. But they are into financial intermediation. Means what? They collect money and hand over money. And I said, when you are collecting money, you are issuing a paper, or we call it a financial instrument. There are different financial instruments for surplus units. When you are depositing, that means you have excess money. That's why you give it to a bank or the finance company. And when you hand over that money to the institute, you get something in return, a piece of paper. So it can be printed as a fixed deposit. That cannot be done by a specialized leasing company. Then how do you do it? Number one, equity money, owner's money. I'm the owner, I put my money, and out of that I can lend. That's one part. Then you have bank borrowings. There are banks which are ready to give you money. Banks are there to give you loans. And as an individual or as an institution, you can take loans. That's another form of funding. Then you have commercial papers and promissory notes. Bracket this and put a hyphen: short term. Short term instruments. Now, in financial world, short term means less than 13 months, or ideally getting matured within 1 year. So promissory notes and commercial papers are issued by finance companies or specialized leasing companies or any other institution for the fund requirement that will be get matured within 1 year. So you call them short-term financial instruments. These institutions, commercial papers, these institutions offer commercial papers. So you get a paper, and against that you give them money. Promissory note. It's like I'm taking a loan from you and I promise to pay back. Promissory note. And that's enough. Then there is another one, debenture. Once again, debenture has a maturity period that can be short or long. Ideally, debentures fall into 4 years, 5 years. So that's more than 1 year. So you are not calling them as short-term requirement. Now, this is how a specialized leasing company is funding their requirement. Now, we look at another institute. Remember, all these institutions will be discussed in a separate heading. As a maybe 1 hour, 2 hour session, we'll look into all these. Primary dealers. Once again, can you just write me a name of a primary dealer that you are aware? We are talking about institutions regulated by central bank but cannot accept deposits from general public. Yes, you have a question. There are specialized, if there are specialized leasing companies which are not listed in Colombo Stock Exchange, some specialized leasing companies not listed in Colombo Stock Exchange. So such companies can issue debentures. Yeah. Now, bonds, debentures, they can be issued by companies. And in this case, we are looking at specialized leasing companies and the alternative funding methods. And here we did not mention the factor whether they should be listed in a stock exchange or not. So the available methods, out of that, debenture is one method. Now, if they are listed, then they have some other methods like rights issues, warrants, and we may look into that later when we talk about stock related topics. Okay, so for the specialized leasing company, they were the alternative funding methods. Now I'm asking you just to type a name of a primary dealer that you are aware. If you are aware, if you know a primary dealer, just write a name. We will look into all these in different topics. Primary dealer will be a topic that we will discuss in detail. Yeah, sometimes back you all heard about perpetual capital. That's a primary dealer. Central CFBF, first capital, that's a primary dealer. Later on, we may look into all these. Okay, who is a primary dealer? What is their job? How do they collect fund? Now, we are looking at EPF. We are just looking at the chart. Financial intermediaries, who are they? And EPF. We will discuss about EPF when we talk about superannuities. Now, all this will be discussed in detail. For the time being, just understand these are the institutions regulated by Central Bank of Sri Lanka who act as financial intermediaries and they cannot accept deposits. Then there are licensed finance companies. You know the names of many such companies. Once again, can you just type me and send some of the names that you are aware about this? Okay, what are the names of the licensed finance companies that you know? Just type quickly. LB Finance, yes, correct. Some other names quickly. Central Finance, correct. One more. That's it. Okay. CDP Finance. Means what? You have an understanding of these institutions. There are many licensed finance companies in Sri Lanka. And just by typing the names, I know you have some kind of understanding. When I said primary dealers, you failed to write a name. Means what? Well, that's your understanding about the financial intermediation, the entire process. Licensed specialized banks. Now, these institutions, licensed specialized banks, they are incorporated to meet with a specific requirement. Once again, try to write a name or two. They are the specialized banks. Licensed specialized banks. Yes, NSB. That is directly targeting RDB. They are NSB directly targeting at deposit mobilizing. HDFC directly looking at housing requirement. So these are specialized institutions. Licensed commercial banks. Okay, just tell me one or two names. I know you know all of them, but just send me one or two. People's Bank, yes. HNB, right, fine. Now, in your notebooks, write down this one. Financial intermediaries in Sri Lanka, and your left hand side should include this, as well as, remember, I want you to note down the other side, right hand side. There must be space. Institutions not regulated by Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Take your notebook and note this. Financial intermediaries of Sri Lanka, that is the heading. Then you can divide into two areas. One, institutions regulated by CBSL, then copy down this. Once you have completed copying, just text me OK. Okay, right. So you have noted down your right hand side, institutions regulated by CBSL, deposit taking institutions, and what are they? Now we are moving ahead. Now this shows you as at June 2018 how the total assets of the banking sector, commercial banking sector of Sri Lanka. You can see two state banks, they are the giants. Then how other banks? Okay, so this is not entirely only on commercial banks, banking sector. So NSB is also included. You can just have a rough idea. Now we move into the other heading, the other side. Note down this: institutions not regulated by CBSL. Now, deposit taking institutions is a heading. Under that, you have only two: rural banks, thrift and credit cooperative societies. Write down only these two. Deposit taking institutions is a heading. Under that, you have only two: rural banks, thrift and credit cooperative societies. Then this is a heading: contractual savings institutions. So you can underline that. You can underline deposit taking institutions. Under that, you have only two. Contractual saving institutions is a heading. Under that, you have three. Once again, type me OK. Deposit taking institutions, you have two. The other heading is contractual savings institutions, you have three. Okay. Now we move into the other, still under the right hand side. Other specialized financial institutions, that is heading under that, these: merchant banks, venture capital, unit trust, stock broking, credit rating agencies. Copy them. And type me OK once you have done. Merchant banks, venture capital, unit trusts, stock broking companies, credit rating agencies. Hope you're all okay. Merchant banks, venture capital, unit trusts, stock broking companies, credit rating agencies. Unlike a physical classroom, I cannot see the time you take to write down. So this is why I'm asking you whether you have noted down. Okay, I'll give just few more seconds. After that, we'll discuss. Okay, now you have a chart that shows the entire picture of financial intermediation in Sri Lanka. A very clear picture. And just having a glance of this picture, you can see what your syllabus is like. Now, this is the map that you are looking at. There are institutions regulated by central bank. There are institutions which are not regulated by banks, but all do one activity: financial intermediation. And there are institutions which can accept deposits and regulated by central bank. There are institutions which can accept deposits but not regulated by central bank. Then there are institutions which are regulated by central bank but cannot accept deposits. One we discussed, specialized leasing company. The other side also the same. Now this is your entire thought map. And since today is the very first day we meet, can you just send me your information so I know to what extent you know about them? I need only very few things. I need only one thing from you. What was your A-level stream? Was it commerce, maths, some other arts, bio, whatever you call? Just type me and send. So I'll know uh, yours when I start. I know from where should I start. Just send me a text what you did for your A-levels. Okay. Okay. Right. Now I got your information. Thank you. Once again, have a look at what you have already noted down. And I know most of these names are not much familiar to you. Commercial banks, you know who they are. Immediately you noted down some examples. People's Bank, Bank of Ceylon, HNB, Commercial, Sampat. Fine, good. Then regarding finance companies, prompt came the answer, LB Finance, Central Finance. And if I give you some more time, you will note down many finance companies. But the rest of the area, look at them. Venture capital, who are they? Stockbrokers, what are the examples? What are the institutions doing that? So likewise, we may look into these areas, primary dealers. Now we have a understanding of what entire picture would be look like. There are institutions that are regulated by central bank. There are institutions which are not regulated by central bank. And if so, there must be some other institutions which regulate them. Just to check your understanding of the area, some have done commerce, some have not done commerce as A-level subject. Just note down insurance. Now, who is the regulator of insurance industry in Sri Lanka? If you know that, send me the answer. You can put that in the chat. Insurance. Insurance companies. Who is the regulator? If I say IBSL is the regulator of, yeah, Tarang has answered. Tarang, I asked about insurance industry. Who is the regulator? Correct? IBSL, Insurance Board of Sri Lanka. Correct? Correct. So you know about another regulator. So one side we have institutions regulated by central bank, the other side institutions not regulated by central bank. But I said financial intermediation is trusted because you have an independent party called regulator. And good, you talked about IBSL, Insurance Board of Sri Lanka, as the regulator of insurance industry. Now, if I ask about some other area, stockbroking companies, who is the regulator? Who is the regulator of stockbroking companies? Let me see your answer. Now, let me ask another question from you. You know about a little bit on these areas, thanks. How many of you have CDS accounts? Once again, you can check. How many of you have CDS accounts, Central Depository? Directly what I'm asking is, have you ever invested in Colombo Stock Exchange? That is my direct question. Say yes or no. I get one yes and all the others no. Okay, now if I was lecturing maybe 20, 30 years ago, and if I ask the same question from your parents, I would get the same answer. CSC was incorporated in Sri Lanka in 1987. And if I ask the same question from your parents when they were in your age, do you have savings accounts? The answer is yes. If I ask from the same today from you, your answer is yes. And if I ask the same question, have you ever invested in Colombo Stock Exchange from your parents when they were in your age? Answer is no, and your answer is no. That's where we are. That is our financial literacy. And one purpose of studying this is improving your financial literacy. In Sri Lanka, we appreciate and we give a very good value to our education. Our literacy ratios are very good. But what are we doing with that? Okay. We'll talk slowly. Anyway, thanks. One out of this sample is having a CDS account and have invested in Colombo Stock Exchange. And when you learn something, when you get the real exposure of it, that's really good. And that is the expectation of your education. Education means change. A learned person should behave differently than a person who have not learned the same. So we need behavioral change. That is the expectation of education. Okay. Right. Now you have an understanding of entire financial intermediation of Sri Lanka. Today is the first day. Now we can take our time to talk. We'll just look at what we have learned so far. After that, we'll start to talk, because from next week onward, you will have one specific area. If we're going to talk about unit trust, we'll talk all things about unit trusts. And now we have some idea of what you are going to learn, the entire financial intermediation other than the commercial banks we will learn. So that will include the role of central bank. We get rules, regulations, directions from central bank for finance companies. That means that's how the NBFI sector is regulated. Every area, your capital liquidity, then how do you look into your corporate governance, how do you look into liquid assets, writing off your debt. Everything is in a written format, regulated, highly regulated. In the same manner, all these financial intermediaries are highly regulated. Commercial banks are regulated very much than other institutions, but it does not mean others are not regulated. Even microfinance industry is now regulated. Now, we talked about financial intermediation, and I asked to describe financial intermediary. So the process is very simple: connecting surplus units and deficit units. Financial intermediation is connecting surplus units with deficit units. Then my question is, can you remove financial intermediaries? And it's very difficult. You have one. So my question is, if you have excess money of 5 million, will you lend it for your friend to buy a car? And he would say, I'll pay back in monthly installments within 5 years. Can you hand over your 5 million and each month get us very small amount? Are you happy with that? You are not. But a finance company or a bank would be. So you call it maturity transformation, risk transformation. two areas that makes financial intermediation a must. Risk transformation. When you hand over your entire 5 million to your best friend, what will soon happen? I think you have seen that is written in most retail shops. Nayatadeemen Mudalat Miturat Natibe. So that is the risk you undertake. Okay. So take your notebooks, write down another question. Can you remove financial intermediaries? Can you remove financial intermediaries? Okay, so your answer is depending on these factors. You can formulate your answer. I am giving you two factors. Number one, risk involved. Number two, maturity. You can write your answer based on these two factors, considering these two factors. Number one, the risk transformation. That means when you hand over your hard-earned money to someone else, you are not sure whether he will be paying back or not. As an individual, I have only 5 million and I hand over that entire 5 million to my best friend. And if I lose that 5 million, I lose my entire wealth. But for the bank, there is risk transformation. When you give away loans to 100 people, maybe 3% or less is not paying back. Okay. So that's bad credit. But others are paying back. So the bank can survive. I cannot survive when I lose all my hard-earned money gone out. But for the bank or the financial intermediary, they have their own systems for evaluating the credit as well as a recovery process. And the non-performing loans ratio is very small, ideally less than 3. Therefore, the bank can survive, but not the individual. So that is the risk. There is maturity. Okay, when I want to deposit, how long I am ready to wait? Remember, we don't extend our fixed deposits for a very long period like 20 years. The maximum would be maybe 5 years. Ideally, fixed deposit we prefer 1 year maturity. And even there are other short-term maturity periods. Means what? When I lend individually, I can't wait long. But when I'm taking a loan, what is the payback period I need? I want to drag it as much as possible. If you say housing loan, the payback period may be 20 years. Now, are you ready to part with your hard-earned money for 20 years? Now, this will show you the answer. The individuals are not ready to patiently wait for a long period to recover their money, entire amount. Because of these kind of reasons, it's extremely difficult to remove financial intermediaries. Now you know that maturity and risk mostly will ensure the stability of financial intermediaries. The other, why do you hand over your hard-earned money for this financial intermediary called unknown third party? Because you trust them. One simple word, trust. Why do you trust financial intermediaries? Because they are regulated. There is an independent regulator who will look into all aspects. Are they keeping enough money? Means, are they liquid enough? Are they following corporate governance? Likewise, later on we'll discuss all these things. What is corporate governance? What are the areas? What is conflict of interest? Likewise, there are a lot of areas to be covered under that. So these are done by the regulator. When I meet my best friend and hand over my hard-earned money for him, I don't have that process. He is not disciplined to handle this money. And we both end up losing money as well as the friendship. As long as this is there, financial intermediation will survive. Now that's what we talked at the beginning. What is financial intermediary? Then we talked about non-banking, NBFI sector. We said non-banking is other than demand deposit. All the other activities done by commercial banks are done by similar institutions. But it does not mean that one institute will be handling all these activities. When you think about pawnbroker, he is handling only one part of that commercial bank's activities. But in general, we would say shadow banks. They are almost like commercial banks, and the only activity which they can't do is accepting demand deposits or issuing checks. All the others are collectively or individually done by these institutions. Now, we will look into some other factors. Since this is the very first day, I just leave you with the introduction. Today, entirely what I did is introducing the subject. Now you know what is non-bank, and you know the entire picture of financial intermediation in Sri Lanka. And everywhere you see it's regulated. When I said insurance, you said who is the regulator. When I said stockbrokers, credit ratings, unit trusts, you said who the regulator is. Now I'm asking you, why do people invest? Why do people deposit in unregulated companies? Write down. I'm asking you that question. Write down. Why do people deposit in unregulated companies? First, try to write your answer. After that, we'll discuss. Now, I gave you a question. Why do people deposit money in institutions which are not regulated? We'll discuss. If you have hard-earned money, 5 million, you have a lot of options. There are commercial banks, finance companies. If you can hold it for a longer period, you can go for the insurance company. If you are interested in risk and reward relationship, you can go to stockbrokers. There are a lot of places which are regulated. But we have seen people deposit their hard-earned money in institutions which are not regulated. Why? Yeah. I know I can't see any full lengthy essay of yours at this moment, but you can just type one reason and put it to the chat box. One reason why people deposit. Yeah, I get higher interest. Higher interest, the same thing. Some other factor, that's one thing. People deposit in places which are not regulated. Number one, you mentioned is clear. Yes, interest, less documents required. Okay. No KYC, very good. You are getting good points. What else? Money laundering, no KYC. Yes, very good. What else? Okay. Now, people deposit money because they offer very high interest. Means what? The return is very high. The reward is very high. Note down there is a relationship between risk and reward. Okay, what is that? Higher the risk, higher the rewards. In your notebook, note down, higher the risk, higher the rewards. That's the principle of investing. Higher the risk, higher the rewards. Means what? You said one reason for investing their hard-earned money in these unregulated industries is because of higher interest. Higher interest at what cost? Higher risk. We have seen many of these institutions collapse. Many of these institutions collapsed, and we have seen a lot of articles. We have read a lot of articles about these institutions. Maybe Dandwa Mudalari. Likewise, we have heard a lot of nice names. They collected money from general public, offered them very high interest, and people deposited because of this interest and lost their entire hard-earned money. While knowing there are institutions well regulated. Okay. Now your answer has a point. People go and deposit in these institutions because of interest, because of higher interest. But when you know the fact, higher the risk, higher the reward, they are losing something. What is that? They may lose their hard-earned money entirely, but they invest. What is the best thing? Losing your hard-earned money entirely, or keep it safe in a place well regulated, though the interest is lesser than unregulated place. If you are a logical thinker, tell me your answer. What is the best place to deposit? Regulated at a moderate interest or unregulated at a very high interest? Just type your answer. Regulated or unregulated? Regulated. Correct. 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 Okay, now you all understand and you all agree it is the best thing to deposit in a regulated place while knowing of the higher interest paid. Then why do people go and deposit in these unregulated industries? Note down this term, lack of financial literacy. Lack of financial literacy. Lack of financial literacy. Okay. Now, it is not only the interest. Got it? It is not only the interest. If the interest is the only factor, then your answer should be varied. Here, you have a financial literacy, and unanimously, your answer is very simple. Deposit in regulated places. Why do people go and deposit in unregulated place? Interest is one factor, agreed, but interest not the main factor. The main factor is lack of financial literacy. They do not know what to do with their hard-earned money. They do not know the relationship between the risk and reward. They lack something in their education. That's why they move out for financial institutions which are not regulated and part with their hard-earned money. Okay. So that's the main reason. Then what you mentioned is valid. Higher interest. Then money laundering. Yes, those who cannot prove how they earned will go and deposit in places which are not regulated because they don't ask KYC, as one of you correctly said. Yeah, that's exceptional. But most of the time, other than these black money earners, people go and deposit in these financial institutions unregulated institutions due to lack of financial literacy. Now, the regulated institutions are there, and most of these institutions you are aware. Some you have not even heard about, or you don't have a very good understanding about them. We'll take topic by topic few hours and discuss in detail, but today I'll just touch upon some of these. Venture capital. So that is one topic we will take up next. So I'll give a handout on this. But today we will have a just a preface, just an understanding of what we are going to learn under venture capital. Now, what is venture capital? Can someone just text me, chat me, what you understand by the term? What you understand by the term venture capital? Venture capital. When you say leasing, when you say finance company, you can just say it's a leasing. We can say they provide hire purchase, something like that. Now, venture capital, it's something new to us. Okay. Have you heard a company called Apple? Apple mobile phones, Apple computers. If you know, if you have heard, just text me who is the innovator. Yeah, they provide capital for entrepreneurs. Very good, very good. Now, my question is, we are going to talk about venture capital. That will be the next topic we'll start. Today, just an introduction to the subject. Now, just write me the name of the innovator, the entrepreneur who started Apple computers. Steve Jobs. Very good. So everyone know about him. Now, if I say, if there was no person called Mike Makula, Apple won't be in your hands. Now, just type me yes or no. Have you heard about Mike Makula? Just type me yes or no. No, no, no. Okay, okay, right. Now, these are the angel investors. When you think about business, a young entrepreneur, a young business guy comes up with a plan. He may either go for the bank and ask a loan. Banks are there to give you loans. But I said banks are looking into at least two things: your payback history and the assets you have. But a person like Steve Jobs would go to a bank only with the concept. It's a very young person, undergraduate, just about to start his life. If you go to a bank and say, I need 200 million, no bank will give you without a guarantee, at least. So I don't have a payback history. I'm very young, just surpassed 18 years, and I don't have any asset. No bank will give you 200 million. And that's where most of the business, startup companies, startup ideas, startup concepts die. But in developed countries and as well as in some other countries, there are angel investors known as venture capitalists. Mike Makula is an angel investor. When Steve Jobs wanted to start up his company, he looked at alternatives of funding his big dream, and he found an individual investor, Mike Makula. And after having some discussions, Mike Makula was ready to invest in Steve Jobs' company. And that's how Apple started. But most of us have not heard about Mike Makula, but we know about Steve Jobs. These investors, they don't remain in the business forever. That is their pattern. They invest, become partners, but very soon sell it out. They don't want to remain in the business. And just tell me, how do you sell? Let's assume that you have invested 200 million in Steve Jobs' company. And after the Apple becomes the most demanded mobile phone in the world, you don't want to remain in the business forever. You are not a technical savvy guy. You want to get out of the business. So you want to sell your ownership. How do you sell the ownership? Can someone type me? How do you sell the ownership? Now in Sri Lanka, Ottava Chandiram started Odell and she sold that. Where do you sell your ownership? You sell your ownership in a stock exchange. By getting listed, you can sell your ownership to the general public. That's what Mike Makula did. Once Apple got listed, he sold out his stake. That's what venture capitalists are doing. They get into business, invest, look into everything, and finally, at a very high capital gain, they sell out the business. When you have such angel investors, young business people will find it very easy to start up business. The banks are not looking into them. Banks look traditionally into safeguarding the depositors' money and hand over the loans. But when someone comes only with a dream, I have a dream, I want to start up something like Facebook, I want to have a software, I want to develop a new mobile phone, and I need huge amount, 200 million, 1 billion capital. The banks are not ready to give you money. But there are individuals. Now what I'm seeing, what I'm showing, your entire picture, which I asked you to note down. Entire financial intermediaries consist of different institutions. And I said they are like vehicles. There are different vehicles, ships, planes, helicopters, and even a wheelbarrow is a vehicle. Means what? There are different financial products available which are suitable for fulfilling different requirements. Venture capital is one such, and that will fulfill one. Commercial banks are not fulfilling all these requirements. That's why you have different institutions. All of them, one bracket word, financial intermediaries, collecting, giving. But they serve a different purpose. That's why you have this whole lot of different names. You have credit rating agencies, they are doing one job. Primary dealers, they do another job. They are mastering another job. You have specialized leasing companies, they do something else. There are licensed finance companies, they are something else. So there are different products targeting different requirements. Next week, when we meet again, our main area will include these topics. What is venture capital? I'm just giving you an understanding of that. Okay, now one objective of learning is passing the exam. By passing the exam, you can show I have knowledge. The other is changing and show that you are different from a person who has not learned. After completing this subject, number one, you must pass the exam. That is your objective. Number two, you will think and you will see differently. And today when I asked how many of you have CDS accounts, only one said yes. And when I complete this session, you will at least understand why I should have these exposures, why there are other institutions other than commercial banks, what are the different financial setups. Now, if you think about Sri Lanka as a country, we are a developing country. Why we are a developing country? Because even now we are facing a huge problem with foreign exchange. Means what? We earn less and spend more. We have less products to sell out. But if you think about some developed countries, we know, yes, we are purchasing these products from them. If you think about America, you buy Apple computers, mobile phones. If you think about South Korea, you buy Samsung. China, you know, a lot of products. Means what? They produce. Why do they produce? Because they have this wide variety of financial instruments placed in different places. And you get the benefit out of them. If you think about a well-developed capital market, means what? That will attract more venture capitalists. The more venture capitalists you have, the more young entrepreneurs will start up businesses. When you start up more businesses, you will have more business opportunities everywhere in the world. So that is the change we are looking at. To get that, you should not be the people who lack financial literacy and look out places just for higher interest. There are a lot more to learn. There are a lot more financial intermediary taking place. Okay. Now, I prefer if you can write something, just chat uh, any clarifications you want from today, what you have learned today. Today, we learned only very few things. What is financial intermediation? What is shadow banking? And the entire picture of the financial intermediation in Sri Lanka. We did not go into detail. We just start up and we just lay down the foundation for the next steps. Yes, can someone note down what are the areas you want to, okay, any clarification you need and anything you want to add on what you have learned today? From my end, I would say I'm happy by looking at your feedback. Okay, you always give a feedback. You always prompt to answer. That's a very good sign. Now I'm asking about what we did today. It's a very simple thing. We just laid down the foundation for the next steps. We looked at the entire financial intermediation process, and we looked at few questions that are possible exam questions, like what are the alternative funding methods of a specialized leasing company? Can a specialized leasing company accept deposits? Then what is financial intermediation? What is shadow banking? Now, these were past paper questions. So even in the starting day, at least 4 questions you can answer. Okay? So you must have a very clear understanding of what financial intermediation is, what shadow banking is, and what are the financial instruments available. By now you understand there are financial instruments which can be categorized as short-term instruments, and you can at least name them 2. Promissory notes, commercial papers. They are short-term. And these short-term instruments are issued by many companies, including specialized leasing companies, to meet their fund requirements. And you understood there is a relationship between risk and reward. Higher the risk, higher the reward. But what a learned person should do is undertaking a calculated risk. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, there are different financial instruments. There are different instruments competing as fixed deposits, competing with fixed deposits, and some of them are giving you more interest. Some of them are giving you less interest. Once again, yeah, so I got a feedback. Okay, so we have just started. And next week, we will move into topic by topic. Venture capital will be our first topic. Venture capital is not asked much in your exam papers. There was only one lengthy question, a set of questions asked in one paper. But for MCQs and short answers, that area is often tested. And why we start with that is that's not an area practiced much in Sri Lanka. When I said name commercial banks, you had a ready-made answer. When I said name licensed finance companies, you had a very quick response in that. But if I ask, okay, what are the examples of venture capital in Sri Lanka, I know that you don't have much or no answer at all. So we will start up with an unknown area, venture capital. And from that, we will move into stocks. I said a venture capital will be growing only if there is well-established capital market. So capital market means a place where you will invest for the long term. At least by now you know there are short-term financial instruments, there are long-term financial instruments. Some are lifelong, your investments. Even though you say it's lifelong, at any given moment you must be able to convert into liquid. Now this is how we are talking. Convert into liquid position. Means what? I invest for the long term, but if something happens, if I need that money quickly, I want to convert it back to money. Fixed deposits, liquid. Savings, very liquid. But there are illiquid. Now we are learning one by one. Liquid, the opposite is illiquid. Means what? There are investments you can do it easily now, today, but very hard to get it. Very hard to convert back into money without reducing your loss. You can convert at a huge loss, but illiquid. Okay, so we are learning words, we are learning different things, and we are aiming at passing the exam. Okay, so with that, we are reaching our scheduled time. Taranga, you have given your feedback. Others, what do you feel? Just note down any improvements you need. You can note it down. Okay, so next week I will use whiteboard a lot, and you may have to write. Okay, you may have to have your exercise book with you, and you have to use that. I'll give questions, very simple questions. You can chat yes or no, one simple answer yes, but sometimes I'll give you something to write on your own. After that we'll discuss. That's how we will be conducting this online session. And anyway, this is the first online session I'm conducting, and this is the another novelty given thanks to the spread of COVID-19. COVID-19 has given a lot of negative things, but some are positive. And this is one positive thing. Okay, so with that, I'll end today's session. Thank you for listening. Thanks.